Hi, I'm Kamali, taking you through the stories people are talking about and sharing around the world on Newsfeed today. Kanye West, Donald Trump, a match made in Twitter heaven, but is it IRL hell? President Macron of France humble bragged his credentials to be President of America, and Twitter loved it. Billions of bits of it are in the food we eat every day, and it's man-made, and it's called plastic. And we tell you about this little guy, Xavier Atta Freeman, whose arrival in the world was documented in great detail on social media. All right, well, top of our news feed, and I want to tell you the tale of two men who've come together again on Twitter. Now, one of them was once sued for racial bias because he didn't want black people living in the buildings he owned. The other one wrote about racial bias in his music with lines like, "Racism still alive, they just be concealing it." Now it seems that in 2018, the two are on the same page. Kanye West and Donald Trump have been tweeting one another, and this was kind of the denouement of their interaction. Kanye tweeting his MAGA hat is signed, and Trump saying, MAGA. Kanye West. Well, Twitter, of course, went into overdrive. We've picked out a few for you. This one is from Chance the Rapper, who's also from Chicago, like Ye, and has an amazing verse on Kanye's track Ultralight Beam. He says the next president is going to be independent. He then added, black people don't have to be Democrats. But Kim Kardashian, Kanye's wife, who probably knows him better than most of us, wrote, he's a free thinker. Is that not allowed in America? Because some of his ideas differ from yours, you have to throw in the mental health card. That's just not fair. He's actually out of his sunken place. That was when he was depressed after his mother died and she was held at gunpoint. And he is being himself, which is very expressive. Now, while all of this was going down on Twitter, the French President Emmanuel Macron was talking to both houses of the US Congress, and that is quite the honor. Not many world leaders get to do it. And Macron managed to get a decent reaction, mainly from the Democrats, and mainly because of lines like this.
By polluting the oceans, not mitigating CO2 emissions, and destroying our biodiversity, we are killing our planet. Let us face it. There is no planet B.
And his response on Twitter was just as effusive. This one saying Macron just lint-brushed Trump in the most delicious way. If you remember, Donald Trump removed some dandruff from Macron's shoulder yesterday, which was weird. And Susan Glasser from The New Yorker said, very likely that Macron could win the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination. All right, let's have a look at what else is trending today on social media. And this is the last time we'll mention his name in the next 10 minutes, I promise, but wait for it, you're looking at a wax work of President Trump and his wife, Melania. They look as happy in wax as they do in real life. And that guy on the left is the real life Sean Spicer. Why he's there, I don't know. And it's 32 years since the Chernobyl disaster in what is now Ukraine and what was then the USSR. It's considered one of the worst nuclear disasters in history, and the site remains uninhabited. Now, Turkey has taken in over 3 million refugees from the war in Syria, but another group of people are making their way here from another nation that's been destroyed by war, and it's quite a journey.
سلفه میکنیم بچه بخی سینه و بغل شده سلفه میکنه سینهش درد میکنه اصلا جور نیسته دل بدم میشه اصلا پیش دکترم نبردیم هیچ پول نداریم
سیباس کی تمام سیباس که ایش بوسی اشته بزنه اول بزگان خارجن بعد بز تایلسای اوتونا بز خارجن بعد بز تایلسای شندو بعد بز کو بازاب کا بزنه جنگ با سواش با یعنی هیچ
All right, let's take you to Central Africa now, and I want to give you a bit of a history lesson on a conflict between two groups of people which has been happening for over 100 years and was started by a Belgian king.
It's probably one of the oldest conflicts in Africa. Two ethnic groups pitted against each other by colonialists. Women are sexually tortured and killed, children are recruited as soldiers or beheaded, and men are being butchered. I'm talking about the Ituri region of the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC. In the latest bout of violence, which began last year, over 100,000 people were displaced. That's because of fighting between the Hema and Lendu ethnic groups, and many are fleeing to neighboring countries. But it hasn't always been like this. In order to better understand it, one needs to go back to this guy, King Leopold of Belgium. He began his reign of terror in Central Africa during the 1800s, leaving behind a trail of bodies. His rule in the Congo is described by historians as Africa's Holocaust, because he killed and tortured more people than Adolf Hitler did in Europe. After years of pillaging the land and killing animals for their ivory and skins, Leopold moved further into Central Africa, an area we know today as the Ituri region in northeastern DRC. His main aim, to procure ivory and to extend his authority from the northeastern DRC to the White Nile River, which he planned to use to take all the riches out of the region. But then he came across the Hema and Lendu. The Belgians learned that these two had lived peacefully for years with no issues. So they did what most colonizers do, divide and conquer. They split the region into different administrative zones, families were separated, and a no-mixing policy was enforced. The Hema were favored by the colonists with better jobs and were also given land. This is how the 118-year-old rift between the Hema and Lendu began. The seed of animosity was planted. After the end of the colonial era, the Lendu began a violent land grab from the Hema, and the Hema fought back. Over the years, there have been sporadic bouts of violence between the two groups, the worst being between 1999 and the early 2000s, where 4.5 million people were displaced and thousands killed. Since the end of colonialism, the country has gained independence, lost it to a dictator who named the country Zaire, fought in a deadly war, got another dictator who renamed the country the DRC, fought the deadliest war since World War II, and got a dictator's son as a new leader with dictatorial traits who's been in power ever since. Despite drastic changes to the DRC, the Hema and Lendu continue fighting. Today, Congolese rebels are backing the Lendu and Ugandan army factions are backing the Hema. Will more ethnic blood be spilled, or can the Hema and Lendu go back to living peacefully?
Right now, the first museum to showcase the art of people from the occupied territory of Palestine is opened in the United States. Take a look.
A lot of them are working under very austere conditions with 2 or 3 hours of electricity a day, lack of food and lack of freedoms and inability to travel and inability to seek medical care, etc. And yet they are producing beautiful work. we are hoping that very soon other Palestinian entrepreneurs will join and fund the ultimate objective, which is creating a much larger museum in a major city such as in New York or Washington, D.C.
All right, let's take you around the world now for some other stories you need to know this Thursday. Iran has a new homemade messaging app and it's got some good old-fashioned anti-American emojis built in. It has, should you want to use it, Death to America emojis. The app is called Sorush. The Sambisa forest is used as a base of operation and a hideout for the terror group Boko Haram. They're the ones who frequently kidnap schoolgirls and hold them as sex slaves. Well, the Nigerian government have tweeted that they intend to turn the area, which is the side of Lagos, into a centre for tourists. The idea got the kind of short shrift you'd expect from this kind of announcement. A typical response was this one, saying tourists would go there with a death wish. And a couple of weeks ago, The Simpsons finally addressed their lazy racial stereotyping of Apu Nahasapima Petalan, the owner of the Quickie Mart. As you may or may not know, the character who voices Apu is called Hank Azaria. As you can see, it's that guy, and he's white. Well, he was interviewed on a late-night American talk show and said that he was very sorry for the offence he's been causing for the past 2 decades, and his eyes have been opened after 25 years of voicing a caricature.
The most important thing is we have to listen to South Asian people, Indian people in this country, when they talk about what they feel and how they think about this character.
Now this is Shelby. She was in a car accident. Notice the neck brace, the smudged mascara, the cuts on her forehead, but her eyeliner is still on point. Now she was so impressed with it that she posted this selfie and a review on the product on the company's webpage, Kat Von D Beauty. It was picked up and it went viral. Now, you may or may not be aware of the amount of plastics we consume as part of our diet. And I'm not talking about when you may chew on a pen lid. I mean actually consume accidentally, and it's loads. Watch this.
Toxins have proven to potentially cause cancer to us, and particularly to pregnant women and growing child.
And our last story is about a baby. And before you turn off, it's not the royal one. Have they given him a name yet, by the way? Anyway, this one is called Xavier Atta. And the story is of Tia Freeman's labour, and it's quite something, and it was all narrated for us on social media. It begins with this picture of her posting a ticket with her passport and ends with a shot of her bathing her baby. In between, she flew between the US to Istanbul, where she was due to lay over before going to Germany, but instead, she went into labour while in her hotel room here in Istanbul. She cut the umbilical cord herself after Googling how to give birth on your own. Now, Turkish Airlines arranged for her to go to the US Embassy to get her son's birth certificate, and the Atta part of his name was suggested by staff at the airport. And mother and baby are doing very well from all we hear. That's all from us at Newsfeed. Do reach out to us with your questions, comments, complaints and suggestions. I'm at Kamali Melbourne. We're 24/7 on Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. Follow, subscribe and add. See you again tomorrow.